Hello, and welcome to this Cegeka webinar. I'm Mihai Popa with Cegeka, Romania. I'll be your host for today. And with people working from home these days, even when we will go into a slight relaxation period, remote working and working in isolation will still remain the reality for most of us. Regardless of this, working in isolation, still enterprises expect to obtain the same results because all companies need to preserve output and revenues. Now, we've been working with remote teams for quite a while now, so that should not have taken us as a company by surprise, with teams in Romania and then expanding to other Belgium, of course, Romania, and then expanding to other countries like Bosnia and Russia or the Republic of Moldova. Yet having these teams also dissipated with every single developer working on their own has brought new challenges to the table. And this is why we wanted to share with you the challenges, the solutions, and the remaining question marks that we've been facing. This is why our webinar today is about keeping productivity in remote agile development teams. Now, in the right part of your screen, you will see the chat window. I was mentioning a little bit before that during the presentation, we have quite a few attendees, so you're going to be able to ask any questions, which we'll be sure to address at the end of the meeting. Now, I will introduce the speakers for today's webinar. And we have Elke de Mits, who is a project leader with Cegeka Belgium. We have Tom Hendricks, who is an Agile project manager with Cegeka Belgium. We have Emina Djujanovic, who is a project leader with Cegeka Bosnia. And we have Andrei Pavel, who is a business unit manager for the Agile development division with Cegeka Romania. So, hi guys.
Hello. Hello everyone, thanks for joining.
And I'm going to start with probably the most pressing question that I have for you today. What has been the most striking change that you've seen when the COVID situation struck and when you needed to start working with individually remoted engineers compared to what they used to be before? Mm-hmm. Whoever wants to pick this up.
Well, so in our organization, we are an organization that was distributed anyway, because we have multiple teams working on multiple locations. I think the most striking thing that we needed to change are that the human interactions that we normally do at the coffee machine or that you do while aligning while sitting next to each other in the same room, that needed to be replaced with explicit meetings such as an extra daily stand-up, an extra team drink that then online to make sure that the close connections between the team members are kept. Of course, since we were already distributed, a lot of the toolings were already in place. We can explain that later, what we use to achieve which goals. That is to ensure that everybody kept on feeling part of the team, that there were no people feeling isolated from the rest of the organization. And for that, there were a couple of initiatives. Mainly they grew from the teams themselves, as I already mentioned, team drinks, extra stand-ups. Another thing was working out loud. So that means while working, making very explicit what you do to your team members to make transparent what you do, when, so that everybody is keeping on the same place. That is, for me, the most, the biggest thing that we needed to adapt to.
And for what I've noticed in the teams also, to be aware that you are calling people at their homes. So at the beginning, you see, for me, I'm calling from my living room, and at the beginning, people were a bit, oh no, you will see my children, or my husband will pass. I will walk through the video camera, and we just we talk about it, and we ask a little bit more questions about how are you dealing with working from home, and where are you sitting at this moment, and just make a little bit more connection with your team members about their home situation, things that you otherwise would do a lot less if you're all working at the same office.
Mm-hmm. All right.
It is very important that everyone knows your schedule transparently. So meaning for working from home does not mean that you're available at all time, but that you're available as same as your office hours, but that means that you're really there and not going around the house and so on. So that, and that's also easier for the people. So that when your time, when the clocks come, when you're not working anymore, that you can close your laptop and do whatever you do in your home.
Indeed. So from my side, there hasn't been really something striking working from home, and also as the other colleagues mentioned, I think it's also due to the way we used to work even until the COVID part, and either that we collaborated between teams in Romania, I don't know, locations here, Iași and Bucharest, or with other teams and divisions across the group in the Netherlands or in Belgium, or even if with customers located in different parts of the world, I don't know, starting from the US to UK, we did work remotely. But what maybe surprised me a little bit, because it's to some extent counterintuitive, is the fact that extended remote work, yeah, the camera is on now. Extended remote work has brought us more closer together. And maybe I didn't expect that, but it really felt like that. And also looking, okay, your husband or your spouse is passing through the camera, or okay, the colleagues see the background, and then you also go a little bit in the personal area, and that's actually quite nice. And I think it contributed to tighten a bit our relations, and we have more discussions, even maybe informal ones, or with a touch of personal area. So yeah, it was a little bit counterintuitive, but I would say it's the good part of this isolation and COVID situation. Yeah.
But coming back to what you've just said, would you say that there were colleagues who were opposed to working remotely, or who protested and would have liked to keep on coming to the office?
I think the vast majority understood the gravity of the situation and the need to work in isolation. Of course, I think we all missed the kind of a suddenly interrupting our face-to-face discussion and the social aspect of it. And of course, maybe part of us, including myself, still wanted to maybe come to the office and discuss face-to-face. But I think in the end, we all understood that this is something that we don't get to play with, and for the benefit of us all and the benefit of our employees, we need to stick by the rules imposed by the governments and then by the companies.
Right. Okay. And now, because our theme is productivity, how would you describe productivity levels once the COVID situation started, as opposed to the ones before? Of course, some may object that it is very difficult to measure software productivity because this can be subjective, but still, once you look at the outcomes, then possibly it becomes a little bit more transparent. And yet I keep my question, how would you describe the productivity levels in the new situations as compared to the one before?
Well, in our organization, we measure, of course, the productivity by measuring every 2 weeks, because we work in 2-week cycles, how much new functionalities we can deliver at a set quality, of course. And if we look at the metrics, I see that the productivity has even increased before, compared to before the COVID crisis. I think that has something to be, it's linked to the fact that increased focus is possible while working from home. We also did a bigger research with the other teams in the company, and there the majority of the teams indicate that the productivity has remained the same or is improved. I think that it's if you reorganize yourself and make use of tools to help you maintain communication, I think it's perfectly doable to be productive, but then in a remote way.
Andre, thoughts?
To be really honest, Mihai, it's related also to what I mentioned previously, in the fact that we already kind of were working this distributed way, but of course we extended even further. And what we noticed is that the productivity is overall on the same level, with some spikes in the positive trend here and now. This also comes from our teams, of course, the team leader themselves, but also from the customers themselves and the projects that we are running. So from a productivity perspective, I would say that things are at least the same, and this is at least on my side, I haven't seen any drop in productivity that is, I don't know, due to the corona situation. It's still a valid question, I think. Is this a situation that could happen, I don't know, for over the next couple of months? Is it sustainable?
Yeah, that was my next question. You anticipated well. That's exactly what I wanted to ask. I mean, should we all just stay in isolation and make everything nice and merry?
I think it's a very hard question to ask. To me personally, I think on the long term, maybe a couple of months down the road, it might we might be impacted by this isolation, especially the isolation, I think is the right word. And I think starting slowly to come to work would be the way to go forward. But again, it's hard to say, because we've never faced this situation before. And I'm also curious what my colleagues think.
Indeed. For me, it's also very insecure because it's something that we're not used to. We never, but we're starting up the exercise in our project organization on how to, what is next. I think what we have seen is for day-to-day work, so normal development sprints, in terms of productivity, that works. But what is a little bit harder is in relation with customers to have strategic meetings about the future of the project. About which direction we are going to take. That is something that I would like to do a little bit more face-to-face. So maybe having those workshops is something that we can do. I start doing again face-to-face. Another thing is the social aspect of things. Even though we try to, as I said, connect the people to each other. Personally, I miss the face-to-face interactions with a couple of my colleagues. So what we are doing right now is investigating, okay, how are we going to organize ourselves for the next months? Which things are we going to do again face-to-face? Where can we do, continue to do it as we were doing? But that is something that we have to, it's very unpredictable. We have to learn that as we do, which things can be done better, again, face-to-face.
And something else to add to what Tom is saying. For me, the knowledge sharing between the different teams is very difficult to handle now, because in the normal situation, for instance, I work in Ghent and we sit next to 3-4 other teams. We are all working agile on different projects, but you learn things from hearing how they handle, for instance, a sprint planning. They do that like this, or we do a demo like this. Maybe they can learn something from us. And the connection with the other teams, I missed it. Now you can try things with tools, but you don't really know anymore what other teams are doing at this moment. So you're really you are on a small island with your project, and that's something for the long term. I think we will miss the connection.
With the ability of developers to work independently, I mean, would this be impacting less a senior developer than it would a junior that needs constant guidance and advice?
Yes, but that also can be managed with remote pair programming. So of course, it's not the same as if you were in the office, but it can be handled. But here, I also think the biggest challenge that we had was with the client, as Tom already stated, because you all know when you are communicating with the client, and he, of course, if there are some people that usually prefer face-to-face, sometimes when you have a meeting, then if it happens on their premises on site, you also start talking about different things, different new possibilities, new possible projects, and you and all that. What do you call it? Coffee machine talk. It all happens there. Now you don't have that. Now everything that you want, you need to make explicit, and you need to keep your focus, and you need to arrange a meeting for everything. Nothing happens spontaneously now, and that's the biggest challenge that we have right now. I think for the beginning, as they already said, the productivity on the team level was not impacted, and the business that we had with the clients was also constant and stable, but maybe the opportunities for new projects that are ahead, that is now being challenged.
For the
Which is very interesting, the remote pair programming. However, to do that, I mean, is someone looking directly into someone else's window while they code? Or...
Yes. So you have a variety of tools available for that. So I think that we are using TeamViewer, but it's really not about the tools. So it's a practice that we usually do, even in the office. So pair program is one of the biggest the biggest advantage that you have. So that's how you it's the best knowledge transfer from a more experienced software developer to a more junior one, and of course you can do it remotely. So it's just one person shares his screen, and the other one looks at him typing, and he's of course thinking out loud. And so it's a way of getting things done, but also learning in the meantime.
What is important for me is to make that even a bit broader. It's easy when you are forced to work remote to skip on your practices that you believe in. So in our case, Agile practices. I think in times that you work remote, and so you need to make sure that you adhere to your principles and practices, and sometimes that means that you use a tool to make that possible, or that you have to find the ways to still keep on doing that. But even in these periods, we need to follow our own principles and ways of working that we believe in and that we know leads to good results. So there are a couple of our practices that we adapted to be able to keep on doing them.
Not about pair programming, but something that Elke mentioned, that now cross-team knowledge sharing does not even exist because there are not a lot of interaction between them. But sessions and workshops could be useful when if a team has something achieved, a new technology was set into the project, integrated. It will be useful that a session is made or a workshop where other also teams can learn something.
Well, given that we've been for about, 2 months in isolation, probably most of the projects that we were working on were already in course and set on a certain course. At least you, I know, are working on a pretty large project, which is probably well underway. But I was wondering, what difference does it make when a project needs to start with teams in isolation, and how does that affect the foundations period when everything is set in place? And did you have a chance to give that a thought yourself or anyone else?
Yes, thank you. We not even a thought. It's something that happened. So, beginning of the COVID situation, a new project started, and two of our new team members, and one older and one that was there from before, they started working on a mini project in the constructive landscape, so to say. The challenge was, of course, introducing the new team members to the customers, to the other teams, because usually, though we do work remotely, when someone new comes into the company, we prefer them to at least in a short period of time that they go to Belgium and meet their team members, so that you put a face to a name, of course. That now, of course, was not possible. But so what we did make sure of that transparently communicate to the customer, we introduced them, everything was done remotely. Of course, it was a challenge, but, and it was a challenge also for them because they were two juniors. They did not have experience. It was very, very unusual for them, but we made sure that, every day we talk to them, see if they have any impediments, if they have any technical problems, that anything that stands in their way, that is removed. On the other hand, regarding the client and the customer, we also encouraged more communication between them. Of course, I'm repeating myself, but transparency really is everything here.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to see some questions here. Robert is asking us, I'm not very familiar with Cegeka development practices. We're just customers. Do you use any specific online tools for remote collaboration and projects organization, development sprints or ceremonies? How do you use them? How do you onboard new colleagues? I think this is a very valid set of questions here.
Yeah. So, without going into all the details, but how we, in our project work, we are working with multiple Agile Scrum teams. So we work, that means that we work in sprints indeed. For us, it's 2-week sprints. And in a close collaboration with the customer to define what we are going to do and after the sprint to show what we have done. So if you ask about tools for collaboration and project organization, one of the tools that we already had, because we were already remote distributed team before, is Jira. I don't know if that's a familiar tool, but it's a tool that we use to, let's say, project tracking. So in which we make, what is done in a lot of Agile teams, a Kanban board or a Scrum board in which we visualize the tasks that we are doing in a sprint. So each team that works in our project has one of these boards. The goal is to make transparent what we're doing, what the status is, where we are blocked, what needs to move, and so on. Then for really short communication and to give status updates, we use Slack. Slack is a messaging tool where you can send messages or do short video calls with each other, or you can create channels in which information is shared. Then you have we have other tools like Teams, Skype for Business, and so on for storing information in Teams or for calling remotely. Of course, we depend heavily on remote calls at the moment. And then we have a couple of very specific tools, Fun Retro. You know that, I don't know if in our teams we do at the end of each sprint a retrospective to see how we did, what we can improve, and so on. That is now to be organized remotely. There are tools for that that support remote retrospectives. What we also like to do is make things visual when we have meetings. So make drawings or use virtual post-its and so on. A good tool for that is Miro. The tools that you use.
Tom, would you mind naming those tools that you use for retrospectives? Oh, Miro, right.
And Fun Retro.
Fun Retro and Miro, yeah, indeed. Yeah, indeed. So these are quite good tools that support collaboration, interactive online meetings, and so on. I think we have good experiences with that, but you could use other tools too.
I think when you're working remote, the most important thing for your tools is that everybody can collaborate. Not only one person who's sharing his screen, but like, for instance, Miro or Fundrator or other tools, if everybody can join and just do things during the meeting, that's a lot more than someone is sharing a screen and after half of an hour, you lose your. So it's a tool to take the people back to your meeting and ask them something to do during the meeting.
I think that is a good practice when you do online meetings, is to create equality between the participants.
Yeah.
So if everybody is remote, that is per se already a good start. So not one person remote and the rest together behind one PC. And then indeed with those kind of tools, you can make sure that everybody can participate and can contribute to the topic.
In my team, we also use Google Hangouts during the whole constructive project, but we have 7 or 6 Hangouts. And in my team, we know that we have one Hangout for our team. And if somebody has a question, he can go to the room and check if there's somebody else to just ask the question, like you would do at the office, and to ask your neighbor a question. That's also easy. That's always open, the Hangout, and you can just go over there and maybe you find a colleague, or just a short ask in Slack, hey, can we meet at the Hangout? And then they meet, and even if it's a question for 2 minutes, it can help working together.
So indeed, I think from a requirements management perspective, Jira is the most common tool that we use. It's not the only one though. We look at the needs and then also select the tools, and not vice versa, of course. But it can also mean that we use, I don't know, any tools from Microsoft like VSTS. It's also integrated maybe with the CI/CD pipeline, or building that CI/CD, or Jenkins. But these are tools that, to be really honest, we already used. Maybe from a communication perspective, again, due to the way we work remotely between divisions or between cities or countries, we used a lot. Skype for Business, Teams, which seems to be more stable from what we noticed. But also, let's say, tools for doing I think one of the biggest challenges and one of the things that we kind of missed was the discussion that you have during the retrospectives. When I think that's the moment in a sprint, at the end of the sprint, where you ask a very open question, okay, what went well and what didn't went well, and then the human interaction face to face is kind of important. Of course, there are tools around it which work, but it's pretty challenging to replace that human interaction during the retrospective with only a tool. But they do work. Maybe another tool that we used, and it's very nice, probably you guys know it, it's Mentimeter, where you can do ad hoc all types of surveys. And it's really nice to also, if you do an ad hoc survey, then you can also have a conversation about that specific topic on the spot right then and there, and that's actually really nice.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope this also covers Sorin's question. If you need to dig into more details, Sorin, please let us know. And we have a question from Cliff, who says, you haven't said anything relating to productivity that is specific to Agile methods. Do all of your findings and recommendations apply to all methods as for waterfall, or is one Agile method more productive than another Agile when working remotely? For example, Scrum versus extreme programming.
I think for me it's a hard one to really answer based on experiences. Let's say in our project we use Scrum and XP practices together. Scrum is more how we organize our teams and the team of teams because we have multiple teams. XP is more the engineering practices that we follow. Let's say so we do both of them. From experience, I cannot say if one method is more productive than another method because we only have concrete experiences with our own. what I think is that it's an assumption, but I think it really doesn't. The method per se doesn't really matter. But at least projects are heavily dependent on communication between people. So as long as you make sure that happens, I think it shouldn't matter too much. But that is an assumption. I didn't test it. We only work with one. Oh, that is also a good question. I think a good waterfall project demands also a lot of interaction. I think a project in any way, Agile waterfall, fails or succeeds with interactions. I'm convinced that if projects don't succeed, it's most likely because of communication and clarity issues. What is the difference is I think that in Agile methods, the communication is much more built in by the method itself. But I think in general, to succeed any project, communication is needed. That is my opinion, of course. That is, I don't know what you think, the rest thinks, but.
Maybe just to add on what Tom said, I think larger, more complex projects also have a let's say not necessarily a waterfall approach, but definitely a planning approach over the overall project. I think the difference is that you don't go on every functional or technical detail from the start, but it's in a discovery process. It's an adaptation process. It's a process that enables you to change your mind, and that's good, we think. But in the end, I think it's also about communication. And I know this is a very common word these days, but it's so very true. In the end, the way you communicate, the way you interact, the transparency on the reporting, either to the team or to the customer, is very important, and is key. So doing Agile doesn't mean that we don't do preparation, or we don't do planning, or we don't build a high-level architecture or a high-level backlog. So definition of what the project will do. But in any case, I think Tom put it very nicely that it's more built in the framework, because the frameworks, the Scrum framework at least, recommends that you have those daily stand-ups, that you have the demos, that you have the plannings, that you have a lot of discussions. So of course, in the end, it's a framework. You can change it based on the challenge at hand, but in the end, it comes with these incorporated and embedded tools to enhance a little bit the communication, where maybe in waterfall you don't have these at least embedded in the framework. Of course, that doesn't mean you cannot do it.
How are your clients doing working remotely? They're probably less experienced than you. You're not working. I think that this is very valid. Are they a barrier to good productivity? What say you?
I think this was a very interesting situation that we had. So in our previous experience, of course, I'm working near shore, and on occasion, of course, I would travel to Belgium, and then we would kickstart some things, and I would return back, and then we would all continue. And while I was not in Belgium, it was a challenge, and you were always thinking, okay, you set up a meeting, but then you don't know what happens after that meeting because you're not there, and you think maybe something's getting resolved on the hallways, and how usually business happens. But now it was an interesting situation because the clients are also working remotely, and they could see the challenge that we usually have. And usually when we have a meeting before the COVID situation, it was 10 of them in one meeting using a remote tool, the tube with the cameras and so on. And then the sound was not very good. They were talking between themselves. We could not hear it. Of course, it was challenging. But now they have seen how it goes, and now even when the COVID situation started and they were still in the office, it was not yet isolation time. They did not meet in open meetings. They joined the remote meetings via their own computer with their headset, and it was quite more productive. It was more clear, and so on. And
Right.
Yes. And the key about remote meetings, I would say, is always that you really need to come prepared. You need to be focused, and you have to know the value of that meeting. You want to know what do you want to get with that, and to have a clear set of questions, a scenario to come. Of course, if you're having some maybe functional talk, if you have an analysis, if you can visualize something, a flow or something, do that, because that also gives more interaction between them. But it was an interesting thing to see. Of course, at the beginning it was hard on them, but I think now they are very used, because we are all in the same situation right now, and even between them, they had to figure out a way how to keep their own business going, not only the interaction with Cegeka.
Mm-hmm.
Remote working, even among the customer teams.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
Okay. Now, another question which I had in mind was, now we've all heard the good part and what we've tried and worked. But what I would be very curious to know, because it's not all roses, is what did you try to do and didn't work in this new setup? We're all friends here. You can be.
Yeah, of course. I'm just reflecting.
I don't know, Mihai. Everything worked.
I think
good question. Good question.
The office is going to be even better and always towards the ultimate goal of perfection.
I think the things that we tried on doing for team building at the beginning, if I look at my team, there were a lot of ideas, and let's do a happy hour, and let's do an extra stand-up, and there were a lot of ideas. And now we are in the, and we also tried them, and it was fun. And now we are in the system that new ideas are not there anymore, and we need to talk about, okay, we did 2 weeks ago a happy hour, let's do it this week again. We need to do more efforts to keep those new ideas and to keep maintaining them. Especially now we know that we want to go back to the office next week. So I don't think there are a lot of things that didn't work out, but it's now the issue to maintain the new ideas and the new ways of working, and even improve them.
Well, and if I look at it from my side, I think we already were distributed before, so the step for us was small, like quite small. I think what is the most difficult at this moment in time is to get really to the bottom discussions with the customer on how are we going to, what is the strategy for the next quarters in 2021. So I think, as I said, as long as it's purely operational, that is easily solved. But sometimes you have to have in-depth discussions, and that is a little bit more hard with the customer at the moment, because those things are, for me, still best done face to face.
Question: did you try to fix the knowledge management, perhaps, barrier when you weren't bumping into other teams in the office, with teams using Confluence more or some other method? I think.
Yeah.
No, thank you for your questions, Cliff. But I'm just wondering if KM related to knowledge management, or to point to something else.
Indeed, it's a very good question. But I think it's the same. How do you say it? It's the same principle as always. So when it doesn't happen automatically anymore, you need to make, how do you say, to make that explicit. So what we have done so it was something that we already did before. If we organize internal team demos, so where all the teams demonstrate at the end of 2 weeks to each other what they have made, why they have made. We focus specifically on the front end there, so meaning the screen and what the customers get to see, because we want to avoid, we are 8 teams, that there are 8 different implementations of the same date picture, let's say. For the customer, it should be transparent. So that is something that we made explicit. Also, we plan, I think it's now 2 times a week, a sync over the teams to make sure who is doing what. Is there one team that needs something from another? Also to make explicit time for those kind of discussions. So it's the same principle. If not, doesn't happen automatically. You need to make sure that it happens in another way by organizing platforms to do those kind of discussions. From my position, I cannot say if the teams use Confluence more, maybe, or documentation. Is there more? I don't know that.
I don't know that either. I think most teams use, like us, Jira and Slack and the other tools.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good question.
Maybe just to touch a little bit on the previous question, and then we'll jump next to the next one. We use Confluence in quite some teams, of course, as a knowledge base, as a wiki. It's mostly related to the work of that team. So maybe document further the specific requirement or a specific decision, or maybe document the architectural choices and whatnot. And of course, these are shared between teams. But then, indeed, you need an explicit effort to just browse to that. And looking at the previous question, what didn't work well, and maybe going into the details of what another team is doing. You don't maybe find that very often in a remote environment, versus if you are in the same physical location, that you just hear things from the next team that is sitting next to you, or maybe at the coffee machine where you meet with not only your team but other teams, and of course things pop up from process related challenges to, I don't know, technical related challenges, and that is a little bit missing. And of course there are some virtual coffee breaks, or even an afternoon break, or after hours something like a beer break, but it's still on the same team level. So I think that's still a challenge. And what if the lockdown goes all year? Yeah, I think it depends a little bit on the on how hard the COVID will hit us again in the fall. It looks like everyone is discussing now that it's going to be a second wave. The general opinion is that will be maybe not as hard as the first one. In any case, everybody will have already some experience. So, to be really honest, of course, we are not focusing on what will happen if this is reinstated for the rest of the year. But of course, we'll take it step by step. Also, looking at what happens, and why not looking at others? How do they do it, and what are some of the ideas? What can you do even better? Probably there are a lot of things. It's always a challenge to communicate, and of course there are a lot of initiatives also with the help of our colleagues from HR and other business partners to even go even further on the communication level. But I'm convinced that we can do even better there. And it's also about transparency. I think it's also about giving a meaning to the work that our colleagues do, and you can also do that by communicating, maybe communicating more on even the business strategy, or I don't know, enforce more the the successes that we have, or underline more the successes that we have, because even in this harsh period, we do still have successes, and that's really good. It makes us really happy. And one recent example, and I think it's good to maybe mention it very shortly, we had a situation where we participated in a bid. I think at the beginning. Then it was on hold because of the COVID situation, as the customer decided. But a couple of weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, they decided to resume. So to us, I think that's a good signal, a strong signal that the digitization and also the digital transformation will continue on some businesses, and probably that will be mandatory in order to survive or to remain competitive or to remain relevant in this COVID situation. And I think it's a big plus that things are going even further, even in this situation. And it's also important that this also sets a career and growth path for our colleagues. If we get new deals, if we get new logos, and I think it remains that we. As to the initial question, what can we do better, is to focus a little bit and to adapt to the current situation, which is a bit different from what was there before. What are the areas that we can maybe look even careful? What are the businesses that need more digital transformation? How can we as Cegeka support, guide those businesses? And I think it's also a thing to adapt to. And I don't expect personally that it will end, I don't know, in the summer, but it will probably also continue next year as well. And then maybe focus in this direction is, something that we need to focus even more and more.
I think that what might change if we get this state prolonged until the end of the year is that we'll manage to put some pace into it. If so far we were running the business, just making efforts to adjust to the situation and hit the ground running, then we'll be able to set some pace to what we do, and also probably before the end of the year we'll have some projects being completed as well, and then we'll be able to analyze them and find out even more clearly what went well and what didn't. And I'm sure we'll have quite some findings there too.
Totally agree, Cliff, regarding the responsibility on ownership and encouraging creativity. I think it's important that, as leaders, as managers, we don't hover over what our people are doing, but just give them the trust that they are doing well. Encourage them, support them, of course. But having this room to be creative can definitely contribute to motivation. Totally agree.
That is, in general, very important. So we are for a longer period now in what we call a new normal situation, but also in a new normal situation, providing growth paths and opportunities to learn is important, because we have to also give the right message to the team members. It's different than what we're used to, but the world keeps on turning. So also for them, it's important indeed that they can have the feeling that they grow. They don't turn into robots because everybody works at home. It's for a longer period. We want to make sure that people can continue to take up responsibilities, to grow, to learn new things, and so on. And also for that, we need to find other ways to keep on happening. But I think it's important that we help the teams to work in a way of working that is as close as possible to what we were used to before. So it's not because the conditions change that we change our way of working.
We have about, let's say, 5 more minutes. If anyone else, or Cliff, for that matter, have any further question, please ask ahead. Is it harder to create further business with a client when both sides are locked down? It depends on the client, I would say. It depends the business they're in. Some customers really need to increase their digitalization efforts and allocate more budgets toward increasing their e-channels. But others have their budgets cut. It depends on the industry, I think.
Definitely, it's different. I think it's different. Looking at the example that I gave a couple of minutes back, the initial we started we kick-started the project. We won the bid I was telling you about, which is a big insurance company, and the initial plan was that we do a kickoff face-to-face with the customer and the team of the customer, which was quite large. I think there were around 10 people, also 10 people on our side. But of course, with the COVID and the lockdown, that was not possible. And we, as a company, but them also, they were used to, for the kickoff at least, and then of course in current meetings to see face to face. Okay, the level and the detail of communication can be on a different level, but then we have to adapt. So I think that's one of the important things here. That maybe if it's different, maybe if it's harder, it's the way that it is. And if you adapt, then you'll survive, and why not thrive? And if not, that is going to be a bit of a challenge. And I think the sooner the businesses realize that and they are open to remote collaboration, the better for everyone. And in the end, just to conclude, the kickoff was done by Teams. And we switched the videos because, okay, you want to put a face to the name. And it went quite well. Maybe not really on the same level as face-to-face, but to be really honest, unexpected. We all got to know each other. Also some, let's say, relaxing moments with the customer. And we did that initial discussion and the professional bonding on a good level, and now things are progressing that way, and we have live discussions often, maybe more often than when we did before. And for this moment, at least, the project is progressing really well, and things can be a little bit challenging at the beginning. But it's quite well. Hopefully, in a couple of months that we do another webinar, I can confirm that things are still on the right path. But I'm very confident and positive that will be the case. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I think we're approaching we've gone past the initial 30 minutes that we've alluded to, but I feel this was a very useful conversation, very interesting questions. So thank you everybody for participating. Thank you for your questions. I hope we'll meet again at another webinar quite soon. So thanks a lot, and have a good day.
Thanks
Bye.
everyone
Bye.
for participating, and
Thank
Cliff
you.
for the very good questions.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye bye.